We did eventually. She said, I mean, Jenny was telling me, so I don't know
I heard it as well.
but it's such, but you know, and it's such a shame because I know, I think people take time to get out.
Maybe we should move on to the beautiful glove puppets that we have here.
Yes. This is very easy to me because these are very popular character in Emilia-Romagna. Parma, my city, is in Emilia-Romagna, and this is Fagiolino from Bologna. He's a young man, very clever. He doesn't like to work, but he's very kind and generous with people, and he is usually with the Ganapino, which is the other friend, with this type of cap with the sun protection. I don't know this in English.
The visor, maybe?
The visor, yes. And this is a very stupid guy, but very, very funny. And so these are other type of commercial, we can say, puppets, but very nice. But very nice because they looks like handcrafted. They are handcrafted, but very similar to professional heads. So they are not like these, which are
molded.
Yes.
Yes.
And
they do look as if they've been cast, though.
They will be a mold.
Yes.
Clay. They're clay one again.
And it's very important, this character, because Craig, I remember, in one of his writings, talks about Fagiolino, and he liked very much him. So I don't remember if in one of the rarest book by Craig, which is the one in which he reproduced Buraku and Japanese puppets, he talks about Turin marionettes and Fagiolino, this puppet. The dress is very, very simple again, because it's a very fragile dress, and the jacket is typical of Emilia-Romagna puppets. So we call this feltro, which is very, very nice for puppets, for caps, and for jacket, because it is more rigid than this dress, which is very, very thin.
Is there any link with the British Punch at all with these characters?
Well, Fagiolino is one of the sort of group of puppets who really appeared sometime round about the end of the 18th, the beginning of the 19th century. We link more with Guignol in Lyon, with Fagiolino, is a little bit after, not much, with Gioppino,
same age.
The same period. There are a lot of popular. It was a period where I think the, should we say, the old Commedia dell'arte characters had run out of steam a bit, and they were seen very much as characters, as theatrical characters, because of course they were wearing costumes that nobody wore normally. And there was a feeling that new characters were needed who represented real people in the here and now. There's a lot of argument as to whether this was all part of the sort of revolutionary movement. I have my own doubts about that, but I think what they really were puppets that people could relate to, because in most puppet companies there was one puppet, the comic figure, whether it's Punch or anyone else, who related very directly to the audience. Usually he was performed by the main puppeteer, and this is why you often find with marionettes that in fact that comic figure has an opening mouth, because he jabbers away, he breaks the frame, he talks to the audience, and then steps back into the show. So we have a whole group of figures, such as Fagiolino, who incidentally even was adopted in Greece. Eventually became Fasulis, I think. So it's a particular phenomenon of the early 19th century, creating new, should we say, more realistic figures as opposed to purely theatrical ones.
Right.
At the same time, on the glove puppet stage, all the characters, or the marionette stage to some extent also, but the main characters actually of the Commedia dell'arte continued together with the new characters. So you often have a sort of slightly funny mix. Oh, one small thing I make a practical point about most Italian glove puppets. Here we often think of the glove puppet, but you know the finger goes right into the end of the arm or the hand, more or less. Here, it's a great tendency, you find this with the Neapolitan guardatella and pulcinella, that the hand is a solid little hand stuck on at the end of the sleeve. It's a little bit of a sort of flap almost.
All right. There you go.
Yeah.
Lovely, thank
Can I
you.
ask a question?
Yes,
Is
of
there
course,
any
please do.
relationship between those characters and the development of verismo in opera, so that you've got Pagliacci and Cavalleria Rusticana happening in opera in Italy around the same kind of period, and obviously you've got the Pagliacci figure which
Yes.
represents
Yes.
the old commedia dell'arte character, but actually what he's fronting up is
Yes.
a much more verismo opera, and the same thing with the other half of the double bill. I mean, is that happening at around the same time?
I think that's marginally later,
Yes.
but there's a sort of, I would suggest that the Pagliacci, in fact, is looking back at this type of thing. In fact, the name Pagliaccio, who appears in French as paillasse and has various variations on this, we can actually take further back beyond these puppets because it was the sort of stock comic character. The paillasse was the clown, Pagliaccio is the clown figure, not in a Grimaldi sense, I hasten to add. But you know, we do find this in a lot of places in Europe going back. So, but I think in the opera it's more a sort of retro thing, evoking this, which is familiar, and poeticizing it slightly. I'm not quite poeticizing is quite the word for that opera, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's very important to say they don't wear a mask, because
Yes.
all these new characters aren't with masks, like Pulcinella, Harlequin, or Brigella. So these are real people, and he has always a neo. How do you call when il neo?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Mole.
The spot. Yeah,
A spot, a black spot, which is typical of Faggiolino.
Mole.
Mole.
Yes, yeah. And so this type of features that were on the mask now are on the face.
Yes. And this doesn't only apply to Faggiolino. We'll find it with almost every figure of that period. If you look at the old Commedia dell'arte masks of Harlequin, you find there are always some sort of great bumps and things. And these are translated to whether we're talking about Gioppino, Gianduia from Turin, Girolamo from Milan. They all have these sort of odd bumps and things, except for Gioppino from Bergamo, who instead of having a couple of bumps on his face, has 3 huge goiters round his neck. But it's the same sort of idea.
And his nose is not like this, but usually Sganapino's nose is towards the sky. So very, very thin and long, not like Pinocchio, but this gives him a stupid expression.
And is there any thoughts on the dates of these?
More or less like the toys, the puppy toys, we can say.
So,
Beginning of the 20th century.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Another point I would like to make, perhaps, about Scanapino, or with Faggiolino, as we have with Guignol, we start with the main figure, and then gradually new characters are created to go with them. Scanapino is slightly later than Faggiolino, because he needed somebody to have fun with. Because originally he performed much more with another Italian stock figure called Sandrone, who's an older man. But it's just you have these pairs of puppets, they can have comic scenes together, but then gradually they acquire wives, daughters, sons, and other comic
So it goes
figures.
on.
So each one has its little group.
Well, I wonder if we should return to the figure here. Is that a good
This one?
juncture to
Yes.
talk about?
Yes.
This one? because it seems to have a mask on it. It sort of seems related to.
I must confess, we looked at this one with some bewilderment.
Oh, good. I
It's
think
beautifully made.
this could be a Craig marionette, but in Italian style. So I had very, very rare for Italian model, Italian styles. So also the colors are not Italian. It's very difficult to find a sort of birdman, I don't know, with a blue head. This is very, very interesting head, but mix English features with the Italian body, for example. So it's very interesting because it's a part of a process, a creative process, maybe at the Arena Goldoni in Florence. So I don't know what is this. Probably to hang the marionette.
We
Nothing
added
more.
the strings, so
Yeah.
the original
Yes.
strings go to there, and then we added this.
We added the extra
to just
bit.
throw you off.
But I would say that possibly I wouldn't agree with Paolo, possibly that, as you are all English, I'm Irish so I can say it, that this is a typical English face.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think I would say it is fairly highly stylized, which again suggests something possibly made by Craig or with the
Yes,
suits.
And-
I've got a note here that some puppets were manufactured at the
Yes.
Arena
Goldoni.
Goldoni workshop from sketches by Geoffrey Nelson.
Yes. Now that takes us on to this without a doubt,
Oh,
doesn't it?
fantastic.
In fact, Paolo only identified this just as we were coming in. May I take this?
That's the book.
Thank you. Discover in its catalogue a design which is almost certainly the design for this head.
Yes. And this is very, very important because
I think they're saying the
this is
I see.
surely
Yes, look at that.
not an Italian head. This is very interesting and a beautiful head because you see this type of carved hairs is like a wood engraving. So the culture of this head is not of a puppeteer, but of a graphic designer like Nelson was. I think the culture is exactly the same. You see the thin eyes with holes,
Yeah.
so wide eyes, and a graphic style.
Greek and
Well, it's
Yes.
also quite medieval, though, isn't
Medieval
it?
Yes.
features, exactly. Yes.
The body is
It's a
very
sort of
similar to that body.
Pre-Raphaelite.
Yes, I will pass on to that one
Oh,
next,
right.
possibly. Exactly.
yes,
Okay.
it's
Well, it's
really
been
from-
questioned that that's English, that's why.
Yes. Well, yes. In fact, you see, apart from having a collection of international puppets for the students to see, they also worked a lot on making puppets.
Right.
In fact, there was a nice picture on the same page there,
Oh, sorry.
which corresponds, I won't take this one down, but almost exactly to this figure. It's not exactly the same
No.
because this one has a sort of high shoulder like that one. I'm not
clearly
quite
taken from Geoffrey Nelson's designs.
exactly.
Yeah.
And if you look at the body, particularly, we put the big body in front of the camera, possibly.
Yeah.
You can get the body of the
Yep, yep.
puppet.
If you look at the joint in the arm, it's clearly taken from the design that's
By
on the
the-
drawing here.
By the way, another feature that Craig particularly encouraged, he had his collection of Burmese puppets, and most of you know Burmese puppets fairly well and may be aware of their anatomy, that the gentlemen are suitably equipped. And Craig insisted that this should be done with his puppets, and here this moves more into his whole mystique of the puppet. It was a sacred object, and the sexual aspect was also significant, which is why it was carved in this way.
I don't know if you know Richard Teschner.
Yes,
He did exactly the same with his puppets,
I didn't realise that. Yes.
because he felt that they weren't proper people
Yes.
unless the proper
Yes.
genitals were there.
There. I think in Craig's case it may have been slightly more the more mystic side almost of Craig, the idea of the religious aspect of the puppet, and somehow that was part of that as well.
Can I say that Teddy Craig, the
Yes.
son, had a very magnificent Burmese puppet.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he didn't give it to me. But it goes along with what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure you don't want to talk about Tadeusz Kantor much tonight, but I worked at the Teatro Goldoni a bit when it was given to Kantor by the city of Florence. It had been a pawn cinema, and then in the late 70s, I imagine, Kantor was given it by the... and of course Kantor worshipped Craig and had been taught by somebody called Karol Fritsch, who had been taught by Craig. But Kantor took the penises and what have you into what he used, and made jokes with them. It's there. It's the famous. The dead class has a penis joke. Banging of the penis on a ruler.
I think that deserves a...
Yes.
Well, thank you very much.
Karagos does that too.
I think we'd better swiftly move on to another
Just
puppet.
before you move
Oh,
on,
oh,
can I just say
yes,
that body, that puppet on
Oh,
the
yes.
right
Yes, this
there,
one.
is a copy of that body, and that
Actually,
is
yes.
Caliban in our production of The Tempest.
That explains the mystery. We could, Paolo and I couldn't think.
Ah,
Great.
Yes, yes.
New
And
mistake.
I'm right in thinking that you particularly like the joint for the...
That's right.
The stomach?
As a nude character, you don't see the joints around the penis area.
Yes.
It's quite clever, the thigh, you know. And he
So
gets
it's-
very raunchy with Miranda.
That's one of Craig's that you've adapted, or that's one that you've made based on that?
Yeah.
That's one you've made based
Yeah.
on that,
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
And
I
that
see.
joint mechanism is perfect for a nude figure like that.
We've got the ball joint in the middle as well. We've got in the collection one of John Wright's, which is exactly
Yeah,
the same
that's right.
ball
Yeah.
joint in the middle for the hips.
Yeah.
Yes.
In fact, he didn't have a ball joint, I don't think, in that one.
But there is some
There is
kind,
a-
there is a fluidity there.
There is
isn't
a bit, but I'll put a
Ball joint in
Ball
there, but
joint.
then
He's got a
Yes.
a
bend
hip
down.
joint, instead of putting a pin straight through
Yes.
as normal,
Yes.
that's much nicer for this particular purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, we can move on.
Okay.
Yeah, this is very interesting.